Okay, I've refilmed this video so many times. So, first wave feminism. I'm going to go through each of the waves. There is so much information in this book. And so part of it, even though it's a small section, I know it's a small section, a part of what I want you to focus on is rhetorically what is going on with the waves so that we can sort through the information that's provided and understand what's connecting to our understanding of how rhetorical theory is developing and where it's developing. So first wave feminism is really centered on the idea of, and the book doesn't introduce this, so this is a Dr. P thing, Republican motherhood. At the time, if we look at American history at the time, we saw a value and we saw a connection between education and citizenship. We still do. This is why we love public education. I love public education. K through 12, public education, undergrad, public school, graduate, public school, job, public school. I love public education. Okay, so Republican motherhood predates public education. It is in a time when boys who had access to funds were sent to boarding school and they were raised there. And they didn't go to boarding school until they were in their teens, like early teens, like 13-ish. And so they had to get education leading up to that point. And it was a combination of tutors, of course, but also the mothers. The mothers were educated in rhetorical theory, like Greek rhetorical theory, like y'all were at the beginning half of this book, because they needed to prepare their children for the work and the rigor of the boarding school education that they would get, and eventually the college education they would get, because we've had colleges. I mean, F&M is ridiculously old, even Millersville, ridiculously old. It's awesome. So Republican motherhood raised the consciousness of all of these women because they were then in charge of raising their sons. So early suffragettes who were fighting for the right to vote worked with early abolitionists and taught them rhetorical theory because they had this whole background in doing that because they did that for their own children. So rhetorically, what's going on here? First wave feminists are reconnecting citizenship with their use of rhetorical theory. One of the big caveats, we have so few records of the public speeches that were given that what we're also seeing connected to that is a push of rhetorical theory and the use of persuasive rhetorical devices into the private sphere. So we would have salons where people would get together and drink tea, and then we would talk politics like a group of women would. And that became, although a private space, yes, there was a group, but it's women and it's in a home and there's tea, therefore it can only be public, or it can only be private. It was pushing into these private sphere spaces, and that's where the rhetoric was also happening in addition to the speeches. So we have a handful of speeches, we have a handful of declarations, but we don't have a ton. Rhetorically, what we see win out in common understanding is that women were looking for the right to vote, and the right to vote then kind of, especially when they started getting in, so there were things that they were looking for: the right to vote, abolishing slavery, and the right to personhood. These two got ditched for the right to vote because women assumed that the rest would come along with the right to vote. So if I as a woman have the right to vote, I can then vote in laws or vote in politicians that will guarantee me access to personhood, so that if my husband beats me, I have legal recourse. Prior to this, no legal recourse. After first wave feminism, it was still iffy on the legal recourse, let's be honest, because these two were given up for the right to vote. So rhetorically, the connection, what's going on here with rhetorical theory development? First wave feminists are reconnecting citizenship with the use of rhetorical theory, with the use of rhetorical devices and rhetorical practices, and they were pushing them into private sphere spaces so they could access other women. That also meant that while it started as connected to abolishing slavery and is very inclusive, it did become very exclusive towards the end, where it was richer, white women who had access to power, who had access to money, and who predominantly had husbands who had all of those things as well. But rhetorical theory, right to vote, and citizenship.